Hi, welcome to the Phys Ed Summit by ESPEchat. We're having a little bit of technical difficulties today, so we're going to get started. Thanks for waiting a couple extra minutes. My name is Matt Bassett, one of the ESPEchat moderators. Tanner will be here in a minute. First of all, we just want to thank you for being here and taking some time on a Saturday to spend some time in professional development. We have a great opportunity today with Jorge. Technology sometimes fails us, so if it does, kind of go with the flow. We'll push out through social media or the Padlet wall where we can to get you caught up to speed when things go wrong. Want to thank the Phys Ed team for getting us started and giving us help all these years with doing it. This is our 4th summit for the ESPEchat. What else do I need to talk about? To access the Padlet wall for the chat, go to the ESPEchat.weebly.com website. At the top, go over to the Phys Ed Summit tab and let it kind of open up, and you'll see the 2018 Summit. Scroll down and you're listening to Jorge, so look for the button on the right side that says Jorge's Phys Ed Summit Chats. And then it's a Padlet wall. If you sign in, we'll be able to tell your name. It's a really cool feature to have. But if you don't, we can sign in anonymously, and you can actually make comments to other posts. You can also post videos and pictures and other things as well. So without further ado, we're going to turn this over to Jorge Rodriguez, who is talking to us today about the importance of play.
All right, am I on?
You are on.
All right, awesome, guys. So thank you all so much for joining us today. It is 8 o'clock right now, 8 p.m. where I am. This is my first kind of interaction with the Phys Ed community from Saudi Arabia. So I appreciate everybody taking the time to come and check this out. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and share my screen, and I'll get my presentation started. And as you can see behind me, I'm in this brand new house. It's pretty, I don't have anything on my bookshelves or anything like that. So we've been here in Saudi Arabia for about 2 weeks now. So still kind of getting things organized and set. So anyway, again, what I'm going to do is I'm going to share my screen, and we'll get that presentation started. So entire screen. All right. Matthew, are you still there? Can you see my screen?
Yeah, I can see it. Looks good.
All right, we're ready to go. Okay, so we're going to be talking about the importance of play. And so basically what I'm going to be doing is I'm going to be breaking down some of the theory that has really inspired me to look into play more and try to incorporate play more into my physical education lessons and in the classroom and in my everyday life. So before we get started, a little bit about me. My name is Jorge Rodriguez, and I am originally from Houston, Texas. So that's why I got the little Texas flag up there. And I'm currently in Saudi Arabia. So I will be teaching kindergarten K3 for the next couple of years here in Saudi Arabia. And if you'd like to get a hold of me, have any questions, want to talk about whatever we're talking about today, you can hit me up on Twitter. My Twitter handle is @PhysEdNow. So really quickly about the school that I'm at now. The school is called KAUST. It stands for King Abdullah University of Science and Technology. And this is my family on the first day that we arrived here in Saudi Arabia. And these are some pictures that we took around campus. It's a beautiful campus. This place is really amazing. So just wanted to share that with the Phys Ed community and let everybody know that we are having a blast over here. It's pretty amazing. All right, so let's get started. So what is play? So what I wanted to do here, and I wanted to try to make this as interactive as possible, I want to get feedback from the community. What do you think of when you think of play? What is play to you? What does it look like? Any kind of ideas that come up when you think about play? So what I would like to do is, if you are on the Padlet, if you're on the chat, just type in what you think play is, what comes to mind when you think of play, and we can kind of go from there. So as you're doing that, I'll try to, I have the Padlet pulled up right now. So as you're doing that, I'll be taking a look to see, what ideas are out there when it comes to play. And as you do that, there are some quotes that I wanted to share with you guys about play that I found online that I thought were very appropriate for this presentation. So the first one is from Maslow. Almost all creativity involves purposeful play. The next one is from Einstein. Play is the highest form of research. The next quote is from Schiller. A man is never so authentically himself as when at play. Carl Jung, I'm a big fan of Jung's work. The creation of something new is not accomplished by the intellect, but by the play instinct, acting from inner necessity. The creative mind plays with the objects that it loves. So I think that last part of that quote is really important to think about when you're thinking about motivation for students. The creative mind plays with objects it loves. And one more quote from Plato. Watch a man at play for an hour and you can learn more about him than in talking to him for a year. Okay, so I'm going to take a look at the Padlet and I want to get some responses from you guys as to what your feelings are on play. So let me pull this up real quick. Okay, so we have a few here. The true objective of life is play. I like that from Teresa. Play equals enjoyment of time. What else do we have? Any other ideas? That's all I have right now. So we're going to come back to this. And again, if you want to contribute, if you want to share some ideas of and thoughts of what you think play is or what it looks like to you, please put those ideas on the Padlet so we could share it with the community. And we can, again, have a little bit of interaction. This might be behind a little bit. So if it is, I apologize if you have put a comment on there. And if you haven't, please feel free to do so. Okay, so I came across this definition of play and I thought it was a really good one because it has a lot of information in there, and it really, I think, touches some really important points of what play is and what it could be. And so this quote is from Stuart Brown from the American Journal of Play. Play is an ancient, voluntary, inherently pleasurable, apparently purposeless activity or process that is undertaken for its own sake, and that strengthens our muscles and our social skills, fertilizes brain activity, tempers emotion, and takes us out of time, and enables a state of balance and poise. So there's a lot to it, right? There's a lot in that definition. And so what I wanted to do is I wanted to try to unpack a few of those ideas from this definition, which again, I think is a pretty good one, and kind of break it down to see, what play actually is. Okay, so the idea of play being ancient. Now, from an evolutionary standpoint, all mammals play. And I want to show you guys a quick video of some primates at play. And through this video, I also want you to think about what you see and what are some of the conditions that make play available to these primates specifically. So let me start this up. All right, so hopefully you guys can hear that.
In the daily struggle for survival, it's odd that play should be such a high priority in the animal kingdom. Yet some animals, like bonobos, our closest relative in the wild, spend hours at a time monkeying around to the... So scientists are trying to find out whether the benefits of play outweigh the costs. It's difficult to understand what play really is, what good it does, and how it evolved. In short, how exactly do you define play? Most scientists agree on one thing. You don't need a reason to play, especially if you're a bonobo in the rich forests of the Democratic Republic of Congo. Games here, like everywhere, are entirely voluntary. All you need is the desire to join in. But animals, like humans, also need to be relaxed. Sad or stressed animals don't play. It's often obvious when animals are playing. Play fighting, hunting, and play mating are popular games. But it's equally easy to mistake work for play.
All right, so I hope you could hear that okay. And again, if you have... All right, so again, if you have any comments you would like to leave, again, with the questions in mind of what you saw in the video and some of the conditions that have to exist during play. Is that on my end? Matthew, are you still there?
Yeah, I am, but I'm muted, so it's either me. I know Tanner's still there. It might be Tanner as well.
Oh, okay. Do you have the ability to mute his mic? Because I think we're getting some little extra sounds in there.
Yes. Yes, I do. I didn't even know I could do that. Hey, cool.
Yeah.
I learned something new.
No, there you go. Okay, so moving on. So if you'd like to leave, you know, a comment or two on the Padlet surrounding the idea of, again, some of the conditions that you saw in that video that exist for play, and for those specifically those bonobos to be interacting in that way, please feel free to do so. And so a big part of, again, the idea, the evolutionary standpoint of the importance of play is that it has some developmental qualities to it. And the reason why we still play and our children still play for such a long time is that it has these developmental properties to it. And it helps them develop physically, intellectually, emotionally, socially, and morally. So this is information from Dr. Peter Gray, and I linked an article that he wrote about play and the importance of play in this slide below. And I think we can make this accessible to everybody. So after the presentation, if you do want to use this as a resource, you can do so as well. If you want to share it, whatever, is completely fine and actually encouraged. So I want to show you a clip from Dr. Peter Gray's TED Talk about the decline of play. And so in the beginning, he talks about his role as an evolutionary psychologist and his perspective on the importance of play. And Dr. Peter Gray was also on the Voxcast recently, so I put a link to the Voxcast if you want to hear a little bit more about him and his research. And he also wrote a book called Free to Learn, which is a very interesting book about how we can incorporate more play in our schools and in the learning process. So here's Dr. Peter Gray.
I'm a researcher who studies play from a biological evolutionary perspective. I'm interested in the reasons why play came about in the course of natural selection. I'm interested in the evolutionary function of play. So I'm going to start with animals. Young mammals of essentially all species play. In play, they develop fit bodies, they practice physical skills that are crucial to their survival, and they also practice social and emotional skills. By playing together, they learn to cooperate with one another, they learn to be in close vicinity with one another without losing their tempers, very important for social animals to develop. In risky play, they learn to take risks, to experience fear without losing their heads, a lesson that can save their lives in the course of a real emergency. researchers have conducted laboratory experiments in which they've deprived young animals, usually this is done with rats, but sometimes with monkeys, of the opportunity to play as they're growing up. And they've developed ways of doing this without depriving them of other social experiences. At least with rats, they've developed ways of doing this. The result is that when these young animals develop, they are socially and emotionally crippled. When you place one of these play-deprived animals in a somewhat novel, somewhat frightening environment, they overreact with fear. They freeze in the corner, they don't adapt to it, they don't explore the environment as a normal animal would.
Again, if you'd like to use this slideshow as a resource, I really highly encourage that everybody check out this this TED Talk about the decline of play. And so I just wanted to leave you with that clip. And also, again, he was on the Voxcast, and if you wanna check that out, the link is on this slide as well. So I find it very interesting that there has been a tremendous amount of research around the idea of the importance of play, and really, like Dr. Peter Gray said, the evolution, on an evolutionary standpoint, of the development that comes through play. And as Dr. Gray was saying, you know, there's risky behavior that's associated with it. There's social interaction that's associated with it, and it's all done in this sort of safe environment through play, and the development of the ability for the child or for the student to kind of regulate themselves through that play. So in that article that I referenced before, and again the link is below in this slide, Dr. Gray has 5 different components of play. And so back to the definition of play, and how it is voluntary, pleasurable, and purposeless. These 5 qualities fit into that definition. So play should be democratic. So with that in mind, play should be, the child should have a way of going into play without any barriers, and then going out of play when they decide that it's okay for them to stop playing. Also, with the democratic idea, a lot of times these games have sort of a natural hierarchy that develops, but the hierarchy that is democratic is going to be understood and have the input of the people who are at play or are in that activity. So this you know, takes away the opportunity for, let's say, a bully to come in and start dominating a space. That's not democratic. But sometimes these games require there to be one sort of a leader, and that leader has to come in a democratic way. So in play, the means are more valuable than the ends. So what that means is basically the winning and losing aspect of play is almost, it's not eliminated, but it's very secondary to the actual play itself. I always tell my kids that when we're considering competition, we have to reframe the way we consider competition. Because really what competition is, it's dependent on the skill level of your opponent within that activity. So for instance, if I'm playing basketball against somebody who's great, an all-star in the NBA, you know, 99 times out of 99, they'll beat me at that activity. They'll beat me at that game, and there's no enjoyment on my side. You know, there's no enjoyment on my part, and I don't want to play that game anymore because that person is so much better than me, and the competition level is so high. And then on the other side, on the flip side, if I'm playing against, you know, a 5-year-old, and we're playing basketball, 99 out of 100 times I'll probably beat that 5-year-old. There's probably a 5-year-old out there that's better than me in basketball, but the point is, usually, you know, I'll have the upper hand just because of my experience and whatnot. And that also doesn't have the same kind of enjoyment as it would if we had a more balanced competition. So competition and winning and losing is really dependent on the skill level of your competitor. But in competition, what we really want, our end goal should be for the people around us, the people who are participating, to have enjoyment in that activity enough so that they want to participate in that activity with us again, right? So the winning and losing in the activity is very secondary, or might not even exist. What's important is everybody wanting to do it again. So that's the means are being more valuable than the ends. The way you play the game is more valuable than the outcome of the game. The next one is agreed upon and evolving social contract. So this one again is I think important when children start playing with each other and start discovering the joy of playing with each other. And in this instance, they have to kind of move outside of their themselves and the egocentric idea of everything kind of revolving around them, and they have to, in a certain sense, become more control. They have to have more control over themselves and their emotions, because now they have to agree on a game that has similar rules of what everybody is playing. Otherwise, again, those children might not want to play with that person again. So if they're playing a game like basketball, everybody has to play within the rules of basketball. One person can't be kicking the ball and the other person just running around with the ball, because now we're playing a different game. So everybody has to agree upon the rules of the game. And it's an evolving social contract, because in some aspects of the game, it might change. So for instance, if we're playing a game where we're kind of wrestling around, the social contract is that nobody is out to hurt anybody else, right? We're playing, we're wrestling, we're playing, a rough play, so to speak, and that might evolve as the game progresses. So let's say we're playing like superheroes, and we're kind of throwing punches in the air. Nobody's contacting each other with those punches or kicks or whatever that might be. And that social contract might evolve to, okay, well, now we can kind of wrestle and kind of grab each other's hands and arms and things like that. But it's always an agreed upon. It's always an agreed upon aspect of the game. So one person can't be playing rougher than the other person, because then it doesn't work. So that's an agreed upon social contract. And then the next part is play being seriously not serious. And what that means is basically that if you watch children at play, a lot of times they're really into a certain aspect of the game. They are the superhero, and they're really into that, being that superhero that has laser eyes or whatever that might be. But every now and then you can see a child say, okay, stop, time out. I have a super laser shield, and your laser eyes don't work on my super laser shield. And it's like, all right, time in, and then they start playing again. So it's really serious business, but at the same time, there's an imaginative pretend aspect to the play. And again, there's a time in and a time out situation that occurs sometimes when you're watching children at play. Same thing I would say with adults sometimes. I know, I've played in a lot of different basketball recreation leagues and volleyball recreation leagues, and there are some house rules that every kind of gym has, and a lot of times there's a timeout to say, we have to agree upon this rule. If the ball hits the ceiling, what are we going to do in the volleyball? If it's on your side, if it's on their side, that kind of thing. So there's a time in and time out situation that occurs. And then the last one is, when you're at play, a lot of times you have the ability to reach this flow state where your brain is active, it's firing on all cylinders, and you're in this non-stressful environment, so your brain can actually learn at its full potential. So Mihai Csikszentmihalyi wrote a great book called Flow, and he talks about that flow state. And when we're at play, we're more likely to be in this flow state, which is where you want your students to be, because that's where they learn more optimally. So their brain is active, they're ready to learn, and they're in a non-stress environment. And just like in that video we watched a little while ago with the bonobos, if they were in a highly stressful environment, you wouldn't see them at play. You only see them at play when they're in a non-stressful environment. And it's the same thing for us as humans. If we are constantly being stressed by our environment, we are less likely to have that joy of play, and then we're less likely to reach that flow state to have that optimal learning experience. All right, so with play in mind, we're going to take a little break here, and I want you to, if you're following along at home, you might need a piece of paper for this one. So if you have a pen or a piece of paper handy, you might need it for this one. I'm going to play this video, and it's a real quick game, and what we're going to do is we're going to guess what you're thinking. All right, so I want you to follow along, and it's a quick 1 minute and 45-second video. So first thing you do, you're going to pick a number from 1 to 10. All right, so now what you're going to do is you're going to multiply that number by 9. So there's a multiplication chart right there if you need it. Okay. Hope you got that number down. And then the next step is you are going to add those two digits together. Okay, and now that you've added those together, subtract the number that you have by 5. Okay, so now you're going to take that number and you're going to assign it a letter. So if A equals 1, B equals 2, and so on, you're going to find that letter that's associated with your number. Okay, now with that letter, you're going to pick a country that starts with that letter. All right, hopefully you're still with me here. You know, pick a country that starts with that letter. Okay, now it gets a little tricky. So take the last letter of the country that you're thinking of, and then think about an animal that starts with that letter. Okay, the last letter of the country, pick an animal that starts with that letter. Okay, so remember the country, remember your animal. All right, now you're going to choose a color with the name beginning with the last letter of the animal's name. Okay, so now you take the animal's name, get a color that begins with the last letter of that animal's name. So now you have a country, an animal, and a color. And we're going to try to guess this. All right, so now you have to remember the country, the animal, and the color. Maybe you had to write it down. That's totally fine. So here we go. One problem. There are no orange kangaroos in Denmark. All right, so I don't know if this actually worked. But if it did, on the Padlet, let me know if you picked an orange kangaroo from Denmark. All right, so I think that's a fun little activity that you could probably do with your students as well, and kind of amaze them at your mind reading abilities. All right, so let's get back into this. So there's three theories that really influenced my thinking when it comes to play and when it comes to motivation being centered around play. So Piaget's theory of play, it's also known as the developmental stages of play. And so these are real brief descriptions of these theories. So you know, a lot of these are very complex, and there's books and books and books written about these theories. So I'm going to try to summarize them really quickly. But I do encourage everybody to take a look at these 3 theories, and then, you know, try to you know, see how they work in your life. So Piaget wrote a bunch of very interesting stuff about child development, and so his theory of the developmental stages, there's basically 4 stages, and the understanding of the world around us. There's 2 key processes, and that's assimilation and accommodation of the information that we gain the world around us so that we can kind of make sense of our reality. The next one is the Reggio Emilia inspired approach to early childhood education. And basically, it's a pedagogy that describes a student-centered and constructivist approach that utilizes self-directed, experimental learning and relationship-driven environments. So there's some really key aspects to the Reggio Emilia approach that deal with the environment as a tool for learning, and the relationships that you build not only with the teacher and the adults around you, but with your peers as well as a student. And then the third theory that we're going to talk about is self-determination theory. So self-determination theory is a theory about human motivation and personalities that's concerned with people's inherent growth tendencies and innate psychological needs. So this is a really interesting theory as well that we'll kind of explore in the next couple slides. So let's break these down just a little bit. Again, these are highly complex theories that books and books and books have been written about. So the first one is Piaget. Piaget has done a lot of really awesome research on child development, and his theory of play, or his theory of his developmental theory, has 4 different aspects. So the sensory motor is basically when the child is about 0 to 2 years old. And there's several subcategories to the sensory motor stage, but basically the child learns about the world around them through their 5 senses. So that's all they know. They have their senses. They're trying to discover. They're trying to learn about the world around them, and they're using those senses primarily to discover and understand, what's going on around them. The pre-operational stage is from 2 to 7 years old, and this is where speech starts to emerge, and pretend play starts to emerge as well. But it's a very egocentric pretend play that happens. So children start to play, they start to pretend, they start being creative, they start using their imagination. But again, it's only based on the information that they know, that they have gained through the prior stage. The next level is 7 through 11-year-olds. And this is a concrete operational stage. And this is where they start logically assembling their schema. So their understanding of the world, they can actually start logically assembling different aspects of the world and make predictions of what's going to come next. They start classifying objects and start classifying all kinds of different things. And so their own thoughts start to emerge, and they start to understand that they have internal thoughts, they have an internal voice, and so do the people around them. So I have an understanding of the world based on my experiences in my developmental stage, but so do the people around them. So they start to really understand these abstract notions. The next one is a formal operational stage, and this happens from 11 to adults. And this is where logical thinking starts happening, abstract reasoning, and metacognition. So again, we won't go too far into these developmental theories, but these are kind of some aspects of each of those stages. And I think it's important to understand where your kids are in these developmental stages. So if you're teaching kindergarten, you understand that they're kind of in that pre-operational stage, and you're not trying to give them these abstract ideas or even abstract play, because they're not necessarily ready for that. They're still in a very concrete stage. So the idea of strategies and the idea of large-sided games may not suit this age group, because most of the kids in that age group are going to be within this pre-operational stage. Okay, so the next theory that that really caught my attention in the last couple of years is the Reggio Emilia approach to early childhood education. So the Reggio way has three basic influences, 3 basic things that influence a child's learning, and those are their peers, adults in their life, and their environment. Now, in the Reggio way, there's 4 different components. There's that need to happen. So the child needs to feel like they have some kind of control over their learning. So this is important to give the student, a little bit of autonomy so that they can have some sort of a voice in their learning and understand that they are the creators of their learning. The next one is learning through experiences. So in physical education class, you can give your students, these rich experiences so that they can explore to find, the learning for themselves, because we all learn from our experiences. The next one is exploring relationships. So giving children an opportunity to not only have small group and large group interactions, but also interactions with adults, interactions with their environment, interactions by themselves. Sometimes, students and we all need time for ourselves to kind of explore things and really understand them for ourselves and reflect on these things for ourselves. And sometimes that requires us to kind of step away from the group, step away from the crowd, and really kind of analyze these things for ourselves. But again, we are very social animals, so these relationships that we build with the students around us and the adults around us are really important and influence those experiences that we have and learn through as well. So the next one is giving students an opportunity to have endless ways of expressing themselves. Now this, I know, sometimes is limited by our environment, by our resources, by the time that we have, but giving kids an opportunity to show their learning and show and express themselves in a multitude of ways is really important for that student to not only feel comfortable in their class, but also be able to display and show what they've learned in that class. So these are the 4 aspects of the Reggio Emilia approach. Now, the last theory that we're going to talk about is the self-determination theory. Now, this is work done by DC and Ryan, and it's really, really intriguing and interesting to me because it really talks about what 3 basic needs that humans have, and those are competence, autonomy, and relatedness. And when we're talking about competence, people have a need to feel or to be effective in their environment. They have to have a certain they have to have the skills to navigate their environment. And if it's too hard, then it gives that person a reason to not participate. And if it's too easy, it does the same thing. So they have to have the skills needed to navigate their environment so that they can feel a sense of competence. With autonomy, again, the student needs to feel, the people need to feel a sense of control in the course of their lives, or in the activity that they're doing, or in the information that they're learning, that they have some sort of control in what's going on, what they're learning, and how they're being sort of assessed in that learning. So it's really important to give our kids some sort of say in that curriculum, and co-creating the curriculum is really important, and also co-creating the assessments that are going to be associated with that curriculum. So giving our students a sense of autonomy is really important in their overall motivation. So the next one is relatedness, and we have to think about how this all fits in the student's mind, and a need to be and kind of understand that they have a need to feel some sort of kinship and relationship with the people around them, and figure out how this information that they're learning, or the learning through the activity, translates to the people around them. Because again, we're very social animals, and we need those relationships with the people around us, and we need to feel like we're a part of something bigger than ourselves. So self-determination theory, again, is really an interesting theory to me, and I think that this is something that we can easily kind of work into our lesson planning if we think about our students' need to be competent, autonomous, and have some sort of relatedness to the material that they're learning. All right, so what does this look like? So I want to show you a quick video from from Bernie DeCoven, and I discovered Bernie a couple years ago when actually Justin Slider, he had ordered these books called New Games, and he got on Voxer and he was talking about how interesting these new games books were, and they're older books, they're like from the 70s, and the people in these new games, they're all dressed like, you know, in 70s garbs and kind of hippie-ish, and some of these games are just, they're hilarious, and they're just fun games. And so I linked Bernie's website, and Bernie actually sadly passed away last March. But he had a huge impact on especially my discovery and my learning about fun and incorporating more playfulness in my class. So I encourage everybody to check out his website. It's deep fun, and there's hundreds of games on there, and some of them, you know, you can see right away how you can incorporate them in your classroom, and some of them are just funny. You know, some of them are just silly games. And so I want to show you real quickly this video from his website, and this is a magic triangle. And while we're watching this, I'll pull up the Padlet one more time, and if you can just kind of jot down what you see and how you think you can maybe incorporate this, or maybe even just incorporate the attitude that's shown in this video in your class or in your school, you know, just jot that down on the Padlet. And I want you to focus on the people who are participating in this magic triangle, and see what their faces are doing and see what their body language looks like. So I'll show you real quickly. We'll do like a minute and a half of this video. This is a magic triangle. All right, so but it goes on for another like couple minutes. But I see this video as just a fun way to get people laughing and enjoying themselves, and it takes really no effort or equipment or anything. It's just three people having fun and sharing their fun with everybody around them. So I don't know if you noticed, the people passing through the magic triangle had big old smiles on their faces, and instantly their body language changed, right? When they discovered what they were doing and shared that joy with them. So I think this is something that it shows an attitude that we can also bring to the classroom, where we don't necessarily always have to take ourselves so seriously, and be able to be more spontaneous and just have fun in the moment. So again, I highly encourage everybody to check out Bernie's website, and it's just full of really just games for no reason, but just to have fun. So I think we can definitely incorporate some of these games in instant activities and just different ways to have students just enjoy themselves and the people around them. All right. So another way that another couple books that have really opened my eyes to what this would look like are these two books. So Move, Play, and Learn with Smart Steps, and a moving child is a learning child. Now these books are really, really, really great, and they have really practical tools inside of them that show you basically step by step how you can incorporate some of these play activities, and even how to balance those out. So one of the great things about these books that they've developed this kinetic scale, and in this kinetic scale, it talks about the fundamental or foundational skills that students have to have in order to progress, in order to develop not only physically but cognitively. And some of them, the six on top, are developing their senses, their balance, their intuition, their power, coordination, and control. And then language kind of balances those out. So in these books, it talks about these 6 different aspects of the kinetic scale, and how to kind of incorporate those in different activities that you do. Now, some of them might be more associated with control, some of them might be more associated with balance, but it gives you ideas and real practical ways that you could incorporate these 6 different things into your lessons and into your activities at school. So I tried to recreate this Goldilocks gauge, so I'm going to explain a little bit to you and how it kind of works. And I thought this was a really interesting graphic, and that's why I wanted to kind of recreate it and share it with everybody. So first it talks about 3 different types of play. So down here on the bottom left, there's a quiet concentration, which kids need. They need to be able to stop for a while, look at something, consider it deeply, and they need quiet concentration to do that. The top left is moving and learning, and then the top right is big moves and big ideas. And so the way this scale works, so in the horizontal axis, the x-axis, you go from complete safety to extreme danger, right? Now with complete safety, it's doesn't need to be supervised. Again, the child can have some quiet concentration without any kind of supervision. The middle zone, the zone of uncertainty, as they call it, requires supervision to make sure that the kid doesn't go to the next level, which would be extreme danger. Now, obviously, we don't want our students or anybody around us to getting hurt, so that would not necessarily be available to them. So that would be kind of off limits. You don't want to jump off the building. You know what I mean? So you want them to have a certain amount of danger, but you want it to also be supervised and safe. Now the y-axis, the up and down axis here, it goes from not being stimulated to being, extremely stimulated. And so the way that works is basically if it's too easy, it's boring, the student wants to quit. The next stage would be an experimental stage where they're interested and they want to explore a little bit more. What else can I do? What's next? That kind of thing. The next stage is kind of that Goldilocks zone, that just right stage of challenge and engagement. That's where we want to try to be, right? In that zone of uncertainty where it's just enough challenge to keep them engaged and wanting more. The next step sometimes requires external motivation for the kid to keep trying. They're engaged. They really want to try harder. They want to get better at whatever activity they're doing. And then if it gets too hard, it's frustrating and they want to quit. They don't want to do it anymore. So the circle represents kind of where our lessons could be. So we want a lot of movement. We want a lot of learning going on. And every now and then it's okay to get, take a few more risks to have these big moves and big ideas. And of course, also there's a time and a place for quiet concentration, for the student to to be able to focus on one aspect of the learning. So that is a Goldilocks gauge. All right, so there's 3 influences, and I'll go through this kind of quickly because I know we're kind of running out of time here, but there's 3 influences to student learning: the adult, the environment, and their peers. So the adult's role in this situation, this is a quote by John Dewey, and it says, playfulness is more important consideration than play. Okay, let me read that again. Sorry about that. Playfulness is a more important consideration than play. The former is an attitude of the mind, and the latter is a passing outward manifestation of this attitude. So there's 5 different dimensions of playfulness, and this is something that you can kind of think about yourself as a teacher and how you can manifest this in your classroom. So cognitive spontaneity, social, physical spontaneity, a sense of humor, and the ability to manifest joy. So cognitive spontaneity just means, you know, you could be imaginative, be creative, spontaneous in your creativity and imagination. Social, being able to interact with the people around you. Physical, you know, getting up and dance, getting down on your hands and knees, acting like, you know, a lion if you have to, whatever that might be, but having a physical spontaneity about you. A sense of humor, not taking yourself too seriously, being able to laugh at your environment and things around you, and sometimes yourself. And then manifesting joy, like being able to show your kids what joy looks like, and being in that moment and realizing that, you know, these moments are precious, and being joyful in that moment rather than thinking, you know, well, it's Friday, the weekend's coming, or you know, whatever that might be, something that maybe happened in the past. Being able to be in the moment and being joyful for the time that you have with your students. The environment around you. So there's 4 aspects of the environment. The time, giving kids adequate amount of time to explore their environment. The space, having a student-centered space. If you're dealing with kindergartners, you know, it's important to have that appropriate space for those kindergartners. The resources, having those available, and again, being student-centered in your resources, making sure they have a variety of different items to be able to display an overhand or underhand throw, you know, those types of things. And then relationships, making sure your environment is conducive to building relationships where kids can freely talk to one another, freely join small groups, freely be with their friends, and being joyful in those relationships that they're building. And then the role of the student or peers in the class. So I found this article on Psychology Today, and I thought it was really interesting. There's 13 traits of being a good friend, and this is something that you could talk to your kids about. Are you displaying these traits? Are you being a good friend? Are you being trustworthy, honest, dependable, loyal? Do you trust others? Are you empathetic, non-judgmental, being a good listener, supportive in good times and bad, self-confident, humorous, and fun? These are 13 different traits that a good friend could have. And again, that's a link to an article from Psychology Today. So the bottom line is play is essential. It's essential, it's the essence of childhood, and it's essential in child development. So things to consider really quickly, because again, I know I only have a couple minutes here. When you're thinking about your curriculum, making your yearly plan, and even planning those lesson plans and activities, where are your students developmentally? Think about that. Think about Piaget's developmental stages and make it appropriate for them developmentally. How can you make the things that you can control more playful? So yourself, your attitude, your environment, the things that you can control, how could you make those more playful for your students? Do your students have a voice? Give them some sort of a voice in the activity, maybe co-creating the curriculum with them. Give them some voice in what they're learning. Do your students have options, or do they have choices in how they're going to interact, not only as a group with their peers, but also do they have options in how to display their understanding and their knowledge? Do they have options in the equipment that they use, that kind of thing? Do they have a choice? And then give your students more ownership. Find ways that you can give your students more ownership in their learning, and give up some of that power, and to understand that the students are the creators of their knowledge, and it's not necessarily all the teacher's responsibility to disseminate that knowledge to the students. The students will create that and have more ownership on that knowledge if they're tasked and responsible for creating that knowledge on their own. And so I want to leave you with a quote from Mr. Rogers. And if you haven't seen that Mr. Rogers documentary, I highly recommend it. It's excellent. It's really, really good. But play gives children a chance to practice what they are learning. So remember that. So the ultimate test in what we do is not necessarily a paper and pencil test to show that show their knowledge. It's actually in them interacting with their peers and their environment on an everyday basis. And play gives our kids an opportunity to show what they've learned in a real life situation. So keep that in mind. So if you have any questions, please, please, please feel free to ask. You can hit me up on Twitter anytime, PhysEdNow on Twitter, and my email is phys-ed-now@gmail.com. And I thank you so much for spending this time with us, and I hope I haven't gone over, but that is my presentation. Thank you all so much.
You are awesome, Jorge. Thank you so much for presenting today. Before we get going, just wanted to talk briefly about a couple of things. We've added up the certificates to our website, so you can find those on there for Jorge's presentation if you need that for anything. I wanted to thank Jorge for taking the time to prepare in the busyness of his life right now with moving halfway across the world, and thanks to his family for helping put up with him while he was getting ready and doing all those things. I also wanted to send a special thanks to Tanner. Tanner spent a lot of time preparing for today to help out, and of course, 15 minutes before the summit started, his computer and internet decided not to do what it needed to do. So we're gonna thank him. Bob Knipe on the back end has been really instrumental in helping out, and we want to thank him as well. We got 2 sessions coming up. We've got Dave Carney is doing back to school essentials, and we've got Alex Adams talking about formative assessment and differentiation with Google Forms. Any of these sessions can be reviewed as well later, and you can watch it again and send out the links. It takes a couple minutes for it to show up as a recording. So the other thing is, who would have known that there are orange kangaroos in Denmark? That was pretty amazing, and I need to follow that again and try to figure out how that worked. So thank you very much for the sessions today. Let us know. Reach out to Jorge or us at ESPEchat and if you have any questions, and we'll keep an eye out today. Thank you for watching, and have a great rest of your day.